Our first reading comes from the book of Proverbs, chapter 3. My child, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments, for length of days and years of life and abundant welfare they will give you. Do not let loyalty and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, so you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and of people. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own insight. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be a healing for your flesh and a refreshment for your body. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. And our second reading comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 27. Now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what should I do with Jesus who is called the Messiah?" All of them said, "Let him be crucified." Then he asked, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
You act disappointed. What were you expecting to see out there?
Oh, nothing, I guess. But things look so much the same today.
So, what's so bad about that? I like for everything out there to stay the same. That means predictably. It means all is under control. It means Rome is happy and I can keep my job. Besides, why should it be any different?
Oh, no reason, really. It's just that this is the morning of the third day after we crucified that man.
Oh, so you heard the rumors of the so-called resurrection, too? Did you? Well, don't hold your breath. That guy was a fairly decent fellow, but he wasn't a god. The people who started those rumors were doubtlessly planning to steal his body from the graves and create a tumult over it. I prevented that by some well-placed guards. There will be no resurrection while I'm governor.
But what if it did happen?
It won't.
But what if it did?
What if? What if? While we're at it, what if the sky opened up and gold and silver started falling from the heavens all over Jerusalem? We'd certainly need to raise taxes, won't we? Or what if suddenly we discovered that drinking from the Jordan River would make us young again? Wouldn't that be sweet revenge against anyone who laughed at us when we were assigned to this disaster area? We could put up large gates and only admit who we wanted to. What if we found out that the Jews have been right not to eat pork because it poisons your systems and makes you die sooner? What then? We would all die off and the Jews would take over the world. What if Jesus did rise from the grave? Well, I doubt that he would want to keep me as governor. Apart from that, reality would just be up for grabs.
You are such a cynic.
Well, it has served me well to be a cynic, and so a cynic I will continue to be.
Not me. I may not know what to believe, but I would rather believe something than believe nothing.
Then believe what you see. Believe that it is better to have food and money to buy nice things than to be deprived of them. Believe that pleasing Rome makes us a better life. Believe that staying away from religious fanatics helps keep you out of dangerous arguments.
But those beliefs are just more cynicism. What about truth?
Truth? Truth? You and that Galilean would have a lot to talk about. He spoke of the truth too. For this I came to the world, to testify to the truth. And I'll tell you what I told him. What is the truth? One man's truth is another man's lie. The Gnostics say the truth is the physical is bad and spiritual is good, and only a few know its secrets. The hedonists say that the physical pleasure is good, and everyone can have it. Who is right? The Pharisees say the law is truth. While this, Jesus put himself above the law and said he was the truth. Who is right? I sure don't know. But with so many versions of the truth, I sure won't die for it, like that Galilean.
He was innocent. I saw it in my dream.
He was a fool. Did you see that in your dream too?
I should have known you wouldn't have understand. But when you see a man in your dreams, a man you've never really met, and you are convinced as sure as you are alive that the man is innocent and pure, then that means something. He said he was going to rise from the dead. Well, I've never believed it in such before, but then again, I guess I used to believe like you. This life, with all its cruelty and impersonal striving, is all there is. When it's over, it's over. Such a hollow belief. Maybe I believed it because you believed it, and you're my husband. But now I want to expand my beliefs. I want to believe that the side with the most swords doesn't always win. I want to believe that someone can stand up against men whose egos are so often bigger than their hearts. And I want to believe that his words won't be buried with him in his grave. I want to believe that people who hold the power of death don't always win over those with the power to bring life. I don't think it's so terrible to want to believe such things.
Go on. Believe whatever you want.
You said he claimed he was the truth. Well then, maybe all truths are on equal ground, with no way of choosing between them all. If Jesus remained dead, then he most certainly wasn't the truth. But if he comes back to life again, then the horizons of this world are expanded far beyond what we see. Then we would live in a world of infinite possibilities. Then we wouldn't have to drift along in confusion about all the claims people make. Maybe we could actually find some answers. If Jesus claims his God will bring him back to life, and God does, then Jesus is indeed the one I look for truth.
Fine. Then when he doesn't rise, maybe I won't have to hear any more about your crazy dreams.
Somehow I can't see you believing it even if he does rise from death. It's not in you, but it's in me, and I have a hunger inside of me that somehow I know will be filled. Wait a minute. What is that commotion down below? I see Galileans, and they look really excited about something. Could it be? I must go.
Julia? She wastes so much time chasing what she will never find. It's fortunate that I am much more practical. I never reach for anything except for what is right in front of me.
In Acts chapter 17, we hear a story about the Apostle Paul. Paul's out on one of his missionary journeys, and he finds himself in Athens, in Greece. And as he's exploring Athens, he sees all of these altars all around, dedicated to all of the many gods who are worshipped in this Greek city. And among those altars, he sees one which is dedicated to an unknown God. And so Paul uses that as an entry point as he preaches to the Greeks in Athens. And he begins to preach in this way. He says, I see that you have an altar to a God whom you worship as unknown. Well, I will make this God known to you. And he begins to tell them about the God who created the world and everything in it, the God who was their creator, the God who sent Jesus Christ and then raised him from the dead. And as he's preaching, people are on board with what he's saying until he gets to that last point, the God who raised Jesus from the dead. That seems just too much for some of them. They begin to scoff at him for believing something so ridiculous as resurrection. Pilate in our skit today is much the same. Pilate was put in Judea in order to keep the peace, to keep stability. That region back then, kind of like now, was prone to instability, political unrest. And Rome didn't want to have to send an army to put down a revolt. And so Pilate's job was just to make sure things stayed stable, to please the people just enough that they wouldn't revolt while still maintaining the rule of Rome. And so for Pilate, it's not just a matter of being too ridiculous to believe, but if Jesus Christ is risen from the dead, then that actually is a threat to the stability that he's been placed in Rome to bring. If Jesus Christ rises from the dead, then as he puts it, all of reality is up for grabs. And so maybe he would agree with that quote from Benjamin Franklin that the only things that are certain in this world are death and taxes. Because if Jesus Christ rises from the dead, then maybe nothing is certain, at least not the things he thought were certain. And he's right. For if Jesus Christ did rise from the dead, if the resurrection is true, then everything is different. Everything has changed. If the resurrection is true, then peace and stability do not come from power and wealth, but from this God who raised Jesus from the dead. And if the resurrection is true, then worth and meaning do not come from my usefulness or the results that I obtain, but from this God who raised Jesus from the dead. And if the resurrection is true, then life does not revolve around the postponement of death, but rather around this God who raised Jesus from the dead. If the resurrection is true, then my success and my failure depends not so much on me as it does on this God who holds the power of life over death. If the resurrection is true, then I find myself entirely dependent on someone else for my life and for my salvation. And that, well, that's not always an easy place to be. That's the truth that Pilate and those scoffers in Athens did not wish to accept, could not accept. For it is no easy thing to be entirely at the mercy of another, and yet that is where we find ourselves. Therefore, I have good news for you. This God on whom you rely, this one who wields the power of life over death, well, this God broke the very laws of nature itself in order to lift that burden of death from you, that burden which you've insisted on carrying, in order to replace it with his abundant life. And this God on whom you rely has not remained silent and aloof, but instead even now comes to you and declares to you that you are one of his sheep, and that no one can snatch you out of his hand. This God loves you. This God forgives you. This God will never abandon you, and that is your truth. Amen.